The grand chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with crystalline walls that reflected the light of 1,000 distant stars. Ambassador Minha stood at the center of the circular floor, her dark eyes scanning the faces of beings who had never truly seen her as an equal. Around her, the council members sat in their elevated positions. Looking down at her both literally and figuratively, Counselor Varath, a massive crystalline creature whose body sparkled with inner light, raised one of his angular limbs. His voice echoed through the chamber, like glass chiming against glass. The vote is final. Humanity must vacate all core systems within 6 standard months. You will be relocated to the Outer Rim territories, where your primitive ways will not burden the advanced civilizations any longer. Minha felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral. She had known this vote was coming. The whispers had been growing louder for years. Humans were too emotional. Humans wasted resources on the weak and dying. Humans built things that required constant maintenance instead of elegant, permanent solutions. Humans insisted on helping species that could not help themselves. Counselor Varath, Minha said, her voice steady and clear. Humanity has served this coalition faithfully for 200 years. We have asked for nothing but the chance to contribute. We have maintained systems, healed the sick, educated the young of 1,000 different species. We have built the bridges between your worlds, both literal and metaphorical. A gaseous being named Thalmic, whose form constantly shifted in shades of purple and green, made a sound like wind through a tunnel. You speak of contributions, but what have you truly given us? The Velnari built the Great Archive 10,000 years ago. The Cradle designed the defense network that protects us all. My own people created the faster-than-light drives that connect our worlds. What have humans done that compares to these achievements? Minha looked at each of them in turn. We made them work, she said simply. We made all of it work together. Counselor Varath's crystalline form flashed with irritation. Arrogance from such a young species. You maintain what your betters created, nothing more. You are repair technicians and nursemaids. Useful, perhaps, but hardly essential. The vote had already passed. Minha knew that arguing further would change nothing. She had prepared for this moment, though she had hoped it would never come. From her pocket, she pulled out a small data chip and placed it on the floor before her. This contains the access codes to every human-maintained system in the core worlds, she said. Medical facilities, agricultural stations, environmental processors, communication networks, educational programs, and much more. Everything we have built or maintained is documented here. You will need it when we are gone. The Olmec's form rippled with what might have been laughter. You think we cannot operate your simple machines? You overestimate your importance, human. Minha picked up the chip and set it on a small platform that rose from the floor. I hope you are right, she said quietly. I truly do. But if you are wrong, you know where to find us. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. As the doors closed behind her, she heard Counselor Varath say, finally, we can focus on progress without the burden of their inefficiency. Outside the council chamber, Captain Jiho waited with his arms crossed. His military uniform was crisp and pressed, but his eyes showed the same exhaustion Minha felt. How bad? He asked. 6 months to complete evacuation, Minha replied. Every human colony, station, and settlement in the core systems. Jiho nodded slowly. I already have the fleet preparing. We have been planning for this possibility for the past year. Transport ships, supply vessels, colony ships. We can move everyone in time. They walked together through the station corridors. Around them, aliens of every imaginable shape and size went about their daily business. A cradle merchant argued with a Velnari customer. A group of young Thalmic students floated past, their forms shifting with excitement. In a medical bay, visible through a transparent wall, a human doctor worked alongside alien nurses to treat patients. None of them seemed to notice the two humans passing by. None of them seemed to realize that in 6 months, every human in sight would be gone. What about the people who do not want to leave? Jiho asked. The ones who have married into alien families, who have built lives here? They come with us, Minha said firmly. The vote was clear. No humans in the core systems. No exceptions. Over the following months, the Great Exodus began. It was the largest coordinated movement of people in human history. From Earth itself to the smallest research station on the edge of core space, humans packed their belongings and said goodbye to the lives they had built. Engineer. Dayon oversaw the shutdown procedures for the infrastructure humans had maintained. He walked through empty medical centers, where human doctors had worked around the clock to treat species whose biology was radically different from their own. He stood in silent agricultural stations, where human farmers had developed crop rotation systems that could feed billions of different life forms. He watched as automated systems he had personally programmed to monitor and maintain environmental controls across hundreds of stations went into standby mode. Should we disable the backups? His assistant asked, a young woman named Subin. Dayon shook his head. Leave everything functional. They wanted us gone, but I will not sabotage what we built. If they cannot maintain it, that is their failure, not ours. Dr. Hyjin spent her final days on the council station documenting everything she could about human-alien cooperation. She had spent 30 years studying how different species could work together, how their various strengths could complement each other. Her research had helped create the educational programs that allowed children of different species to learn side by side. Will they continue the programs? One of her alien colleagues asked, an elderly Velnari who had worked with her for decades. Left all the materials, Hyjin said sadly. But the programs were designed with human teachers in mind. We understood how to adapt lessons for different learning styles, different biological needs, different cultural contexts. I do not know if anyone else will have the patience for it. The final transport ships gathered near Earth. Captain Jiho, now commanding the entire evacuation fleet, looked at the blue planet through the viewport of his flagship. He had been born on that world, as had his parents and grandparents going back countless generations. Now he was leading his people away from it, perhaps forever. All ships report ready for departure, his communications officer reported. Jiho took one last long look at Earth. At Luna circling nearby, at the orbital stations that had housed millions of humans. Signal all ships, he said. Begin jump sequence. Destination, outer rim sectors. The fleet vanished in bursts of light, leaving the core systems behind. In their wake, they left empty buildings, silent machines, and a galaxy that did not yet understand what it had lost. Ambassador Minha sat in her quarters on one of the colony ships. Looking at a picture of the council chamber, she had given them everything they needed to succeed without humanity. She had documented every process, every system, every little detail of what humans did to keep galactic civilization running smoothly, but she knew something the council members did not. She knew that information alone was not enough. The galaxy needed more than just knowledge of how things worked. It needed people who cared enough to make sure things kept working. It needed people who would get up in the middle of the night to fix a broken atmospheric processor on a station they had never visited, just because lives depended on it. It needed people who would spend years learning an alien language just so they could teach that species children. It needed people who saw every problem as something to solve together, not something to exploit. The galaxy would learn that lesson soon enough. Minha only hoped it would not be too late when they did. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the darkness of space. Counselor Vareth stood in his private chamber, reviewing reports on his crystalline display surface. Everything had proceeded smoothly, just as he had predicted. The core systems functioned perfectly without the burden of humanity's presence. A chime indicated an incoming message. Trade Minister Kolvex appeared in holographic form, his gaseous body swirling with agitation. Counselor Varath, we have a problem at Nexus Hub. The medical center has experienced multiple equipment failures. 7 patients died in the past week. Vareth's crystalline form dimmed slightly with irritation. Equipment fails. Replace it. Why bring this minor matter to my attention? Because we cannot determine what is wrong, Kolvex replied. The human doctors left detailed manuals, but the equipment behaves in ways we do not understand. It keeps shutting down, claiming that treatment protocols are harmful, but our physicians insist the protocols are correct. Then override the safety systems, Verith said dismissively. We tried. 3 more patients died when we did that. Verith was silent for a moment. Send specialists to investigate. This is likely just an adjustment period. But the problems at Nexus Hub were not isolated. Station Commander Yuki, a cradle, who had taken over the mining facility Epsilon 7, contacted the council 2 days later. His insectoid form clicked and chittered with frustration as he spoke. The mining equipment has ceased functioning, Yuki reported. The systems claim there are safety violations, but we see no hazards. The human engineers designed these machines with excessive redundancies that reduce efficiency. We removed the unnecessary backup systems, and now nothing works at all. A council engineer was dispatched to examine the situation. What she found confused her even more. The mining equipment was designed with multiple layers of safety systems that constantly monitored air quality, structural integrity, and worker health. When the redundant systems were removed, the primary system recognized that it could not guarantee safety and shut down entirely. It is programmed to refuse operation if it might harm workers, the engineer explained. The humans valued worker safety over efficiency. Commander Yuki made an angry clicking sound. That is absurd. Mining is dangerous work. Acceptable losses are part of the process. Perhaps to us, the engineer said, but not to humans. They considered every life valuable enough to sacrifice efficiency. The mining station remained shut down. Without the ore it produced, its manufacturing facilities across 3 sectors began to experience supply shortages. Dr. Borum watched all of this from her hidden observation post. She had not left with the others, choosing instead to stay behind in secret to document what would happen. She knew the council would never admit they needed humans back unless the evidence was overwhelming. Someone needed to record the truth. From her concealed position on a remote asteroid station, she monitored communications across the core systems. The reports grew more concerning each day in the agricultural sector. The carefully balanced crop rotation systems began to fail. The alien farmers who took over the stations saw the fields lying fallow and thought the humans had simply been lazy. They planted crops in every field, maximizing short-term production. Within weeks, the soil was depleted. Crops withered and died. The complex system of nutrients, beneficial microorganisms, and rest periods that humans had maintained was disrupted. Famine threatened dozens of worlds that depended on those agricultural stations. The humans left instructions. One farmer protested to his supervisor. They say the soil must rest, that we must rotate specific crops in specific sequences, that we must maintain the microorganism balance. Superstition, the supervisor declared. Soil is soil. It does not need rest. Plant food crops in every field. But the soil did need rest. The humans had understood something that their more technologically advanced neighbors had forgotten. Nature operated on principles that could not be overridden by force of will. The galaxy had grown so advanced that they had forgotten the fundamental rules that governed biological systems. Trade routes began to experience unprecedented delays. The complex logistics network that had connected thousands of worlds operated on sophisticated AI systems that humans had programmed and maintained. These systems did not simply calculate the fastest routes or the most profitable exchanges. They had been designed to ensure fair distribution, to prevent exploitation, to guarantee that even remote colonies received essential supplies. When the A's went unmaintained, they began to malfunction in strange ways. They would refuse certain transactions without explanation. They would reroute shipments in patterns that made no economic sense. They would prioritize deliveries to poor colonies over wealthy trading hubs. Trade. Minister Kolvek spent days trying to understand the logic. Finally, a technician discovered notes hidden deep in the code. The humans had programmed ethical subroutines into every AI system. The A's were designed to value life and fairness over profit and efficiency. They would not facilitate transactions that might harm vulnerable populations, even if those transactions were legal.
All right.
The ethical subroutines, Kolvex ordered. The technician tried. The eyes crashed immediately. They had been built from the ground up with ethics as a fundamental operating principle. Remove that principle, and the entire system collapsed. Shipments began to fail. Shortages developed. Prices skyrocketed. Worlds that had never known want began to ration supplies. Counselor Vareth called an emergency session of the Inner Council. Around him, the other senior members gathered in holographic form. Their collective unease was palpable. "These are minor technical difficulties," Vareth insisted. "We have the manuals the humans left. We have their documentation. We simply need time to understand their systems." "The problem is not understanding," an elderly Valneri counselor said quietly. "I worked alongside humans for 50 years before they left. I am beginning to realize that we never truly saw what they did. They did not just maintain our technology. They maintained our civilization." "Ridiculous," Varath snapped. "We built this civilization long before humans existed." "We built it, yes," the elder agreed. "But somewhere along the way, we forgot how to maintain it. We created wonders, and then we stopped caring about the mundane work of keeping those wonders functioning. We became so focused on advancement that we ignored preservation. The humans did the work we considered beneath us, and we never realized how essential that work was." Disease began to spread through the core systems. The quarantine protocols that humans had quietly maintained were no longer in effect. Infected ships traveled freely between worlds. Medical stations that could have contained the outbreaks were non-functional, their equipment still refusing to operate without human oversight. Dr. Borum documented everything from her hidden station. She recorded the council meetings, the growing panic, the increasingly desperate attempts to restore functionality to systems they did not understand. She felt no satisfaction in watching the galaxy struggle. She only felt sadness. She had warned them. Ambassador Minha had warned them. Every human who served the galactic community had known this would happen. But the council had not wanted to listen. On a military station near the core worlds, an alarm suddenly blared. The defense network, the ancient system that had protected civilized space for millennia, showed a critical error. General Throck, the Cradle military commander, stared at the display in disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "The defense network has functioned perfectly for 10,000 years. His technical officers' insectoid features showed confusion. The network reports that primary relays are failing. Backup systems are compensating, but they are degrading rapidly. According to these readings, the network should have failed completely centuries ago." "That is impossible," the officer said slowly. "It was being maintained by someone. Someone who never told us they were doing it." Throck felt a chill despite his hardened exoskeleton. "The humans. There are records here of regular maintenance hidden in subsystems we never examined. The humans had been repairing and upgrading the defense network for decades. They never asked for permission. They never reported it. They just did it. Can we continue the maintenance?" The officer studied the data. "I do not understand half of what they did. They interfaced with technology thousands of years more advanced than their own, and somehow made it work better. Their notes reference concepts our best scientists do not recognize." The defense network continued to degrade. Within weeks, pirates and raiders who had been kept at bay for centuries began to probe the borders of civilized space. For the first time in living memory, core worlds faced the threat of attack. Counselor Varath no longer dismissed the problems as minor adjustments. He stood in his chamber, surrounded by reports of system failures, economic collapse, disease outbreaks, and military vulnerabilities. Everything was falling apart, and he finally understood why. The humans had not been repair technicians and nursemaids. They had been the glue that held galactic civilization together. They had done 1,000 thankless jobs that no one else wanted to do. They had maintained systems that everyone else considered beneath their attention. They had cared about things that advanced species had decided were not worth caring about, and now they were gone. Vareth accessed the communication system, preparing to do something he had never imagined he would need to do. He would send a message to the Outer Rim, to the humans who had been cast out. He would ask them to return, but as he composed the message, pride held his crystalline fingers frozen. What would he say? That they had been wrong? That they needed the species they had exiled? That humanity had been essential after all? He closed the communication channel without sending anything. Not yet. Surely they could fix these problems themselves. Surely the galaxy did not truly need humanity. But deep in his crystalline heart, Counselor Vareth was beginning to fear that they did. 8 months after the humans left, the Galactic Defense Network suffered its first complete sector failure. General Throck stood in the command center, watching in horror as an entire region of space went dark on his displays. No sensors, no shields, no automated defenses, nothing. "Get it back online," he ordered, his voice tight with controlled panic. His technical officers worked frantically at their stations. Hours passed, then days. The sector remained dark, and then the raiders came. They swept through the undefended space like a plague, hitting colony after colony. These were not sophisticated enemies with advanced technology. They were common pirates who had been held at bay for centuries by the defense network. Now they faced no resistance at all. "How many ships can we deploy?" Throck asked. 12 cruisers are available in that region, his tactical officer replied. But the sector covers the space equivalent of 300 solar systems. We cannot protect them all with conventional forces. "Why can we not restore the network?" "Because we do not understand how it works anymore, sir. The core technology is 10,000 years old. We lost the knowledge to maintain it millennia ago. The humans somehow figured it out and kept it running. Without them," Yaphis' voice trailed off. Throck struck his command console with one chitinous fist. "Find me someone who worked with the human engineers. Find me anyone who knows what they did." That search led them to Engineer Soman. She was listed in the old human registry as having been the chief maintenance officer for the Defense Network's core systems. But she was gone, somewhere in the outer rim with the rest of humanity. They found her logs instead. Detailed records of every repair, every upgrade, every problem she had solved. The logs were written in clear, simple language, as if she had known that someday someone would need to understand. "I found an entry from 2 years ago," one technician reported. She writes, "Today, I replaced the primary relay in Sector 7. Again, this is the 4th time this year. The relay is original hardware, over 10,000 years old. I have no idea how it still functions at all. I have requisitioned a replacement from the Velnary manufacturers 3 times. They tell me the part cannot fail because it was designed by master engineers. I have stopped asking. I will continue to repair it manually." The technician looked up from the display. "There are thousands of entries like this." She was holding the entire network together with repairs that she never reported because no one would believe her. Why would she not report it? Throck demanded, "Because no one listened to humans, sir. We thought we knew better. In another sector, the Great Archive was dying. This massive repository of knowledge contained the collected wisdom of 10,000 years of galactic civilization. Every discovery, every cultural achievement, every piece of information deemed worth preserving was stored in its ancient databanks. The archive had been built by the Velnary at the height of their civilization. They had designed it to last forever, using data storage technology that was supposed to be indestructible. And for thousands of years it had been perfect, but now files were corrupting. Data was disappearing. Entire sections of the archive were becoming inaccessible. Investigator Prex was hired to determine the cause. He was a renowned expert in ancient technology, a Velnary, who had spent 3 centuries studying the great works of his ancestors. He entered the archive with confidence, certain he could solve any problem related to Velnary engineering. What he found destroyed that confidence completely. "The data format is ancient," he reported to the council. "So ancient that modern systems cannot read it directly. Someone has been translating the data, converting it to contemporary formats, ensuring it remains accessible. That someone was human archivists. We have the translation software," Counselor Vareth said. "The humans left it behind." "The software is not enough," Prex explained. "The ancient data contains context that pure software cannot interpret. Cultural references, idiomatic expressions, concepts that exist in one language, but not another. The humans did not just translate words. They translated meaning. They spent years learning dead languages, studying extinct cultures, understanding contexts that no one else cared about. Without them, we can translate the words, but we lose the knowledge. Then we will hire new translators who? Prex asked. The Velnari consider such work beneath them. We are creators, not maintainers. The Cradle have no interest in ancient knowledge. The Thalmic cannot even interact with physical data systems. The humans did this work because they valued preservation. They believed that knowledge was worth protecting, even knowledge from civilizations that no longer existed. Does anyone else in the galaxy share that belief? The council chamber was silent. Meanwhile, environmental systems across hundreds of stations began to fail. The failures were subtle at first. Temperature fluctuations of a few degrees, slight variations in atmospheric pressure, minor changes in air composition, but each station housed multiple species with different environmental needs. The Thalmic required a specific mixture of gases that was toxic to Cradle. The Velnari needed lower temperatures than most organic species could survive. The systems that balanced these needs were incredibly complex, requiring constant monitoring and adjustment. Human environmental engineers had maintained these systems, making thousands of tiny adjustments every day to keep everyone comfortable and safe. They had programmed smart systems that learned and adapted, that predicted problems before they became critical, that balanced the needs of radically different life forms. Without human oversight, the systems began to drift toward default settings designed for the species that had built each station. Thalmic on Cradle stations found the atmosphere becoming toxic. Velnari on multi-species habitats suffered in the heat. Organic species on old Velnari stations began to freeze. Evacuation orders went out, but there were not enough ships. There were not enough habitats. Species that had lived together peacefully for generations suddenly became incompatible again. In the education sector, the consequences were equally severe. Dr. Hygin's carefully designed learning programs began to collapse without human teachers to guide them. The programs were adaptive, designed to adjust to each student's learning style, but they required constant human input to function properly. Alien teachers tried to use the programs, but they did not understand the underlying philosophy. They taught their own species effectively but struggled with foreign students. The cross-cultural education that had been a foundation of Galactic's unity began to crumble. Young Cradle could not learn from Velnari teachers. Thalmic students found organic instructors incomprehensible. The children of different species who had once learned together were now segregated back into single-species schools. Understanding and cooperation between species began to decline in a single generation. The galactic economy was in freefall. Trade routes were disrupted. Supply chains had broken down. Agricultural failures had created food shortages. Medical crises overwhelmed the non-functional health systems. The defense network could not protect them. Even basic communication between species was becoming difficult as the translation. Matrices glitched and failed. Counselor Veroth finally understood the full scope of the disaster. He called an emergency session of the full council, and for the first time he spoke the truth. "We were wrong," he said, his crystalline voice heavy with defeat. "We thought the humans were primitive. We thought they contributed nothing of value. We were blind. They were the foundation of everything we took for granted. They maintained our technology, healed our sick, educated our children, balanced our environments, managed our trade, protected our borders, and preserved our knowledge. They did the work we considered beneath us, and we never realized that this work was what kept our civilization functioning." "Then we must bring them back," Trade Minister Kolvac said. "Will they come?" another counselor asked. "We exiled them. We called them inferior. We mocked their contributions. Why would they help us now?" "Because they are human," an old Velnari counselor said quietly. "They help. It is what they do. It is who they are. The question is not whether they will help. The question is whether they should." A younger counselor, one who had opposed the exile from the beginning, spoke up. "We do not deserve their help. But our people do not deserve to suffer for our mistakes. We must ask, even if they refuse. We must try." The council voted. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Coalition, they voted unanimously. They would send a delegation to the Outer Rim to find humanity and beg for their return. But as they prepared the ships for the journey,
reports came in.
3 colonies had descended into civil war as species fought over dwindling resources. 5 stations had been completely evacuated due to environmental failures. The defense network had failed in 2 more sectors, and raiders were spreading unchecked through core space. The galaxy was unraveling faster than anyone had imagined possible. The question was no longer whether humans would return, but whether there would be anything left to save by the time the delegation found them. Investigator. Prex compiled his final report in the dying Great Archive. Surrounded by corrupting data and failing systems, he wrote, "The humans were not remarkable for their technology. They were not able for their strength or their intelligence. They were remarkable for something we had lost long ago. They cared. They cared about maintaining things that others had built. They cared about healing those who were sick. They cared about teaching those who wanted to learn. They cared about making sure everyone had enough, even if it meant they had less. They cared about doing the small, thankless tasks that no one else wanted to do. We thought this made them weak. We were wrong. This made them essential. This made them irreplaceable. And now they are gone, and we are learning the cost of that loss." He uploaded the report to the council and then sat back, watching as another section of ancient knowledge disappeared forever into corrupted data. Somewhere in the outer rim, humans were building a new civilization. Here in the core, the old civilization was dying. The delegation would leave in 3 days. Prex hoped they were not already too late. The delegation ship traveled through the outer rim for weeks. Following the last known coordinates of the human fleet, Counselor Varath led the delegation personally, something unprecedented for a council member of his status. With him came representatives from each major species, all of them humbled by the catastrophe that had befallen their civilization. They expected to find humans struggling to survive in the harsh outer rim, barely clinging to existence in the regions they had been exiled to. What they found instead shocked them into silence. The human colonies were thriving. Captain Jiho, now Admiral Jiho of the Human Concordat, stood on the observation deck of Humanity's Hope, the flagship station of the new human civilization. Beside him, Ambassador Minha watched as the delegation ship approached, requesting permission to dock. "Should we make them wait?" Jiho asked with a slight smile. Minha shook her head. "We are not petty. Grant them permission." The delegation was escorted to a conference room that overlooked a bustling human colony. Through the transparent walls, they could see hundreds of ships coming and going. Construction projects underway, agricultural domes producing abundant crops. The humans had not just survived in exile, they had flourished. Counselor Varath entered the room, and for the first time in his long life, he felt small. Not because of the room's size, but because of the weight of his mistakes. Minha stood to greet them, her expression neutral but not hostile. Ambassador Minha Varath said, his crystalline voice subdued, "Thank you for agreeing to see us." Of course, Minha replied, "Please, sit. I assume you have come a long way." They took their seats around the table. Varath noticed that the chairs had been specifically designed to accommodate each species present. Even now, even after being exiled, the humans had prepared for their comfort. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries," Varath began. "The core systems are failing. Everything is falling apart. We came to ask for your help." "Tell me what is happening," Minha said calmly. Varath did. He described the defense network failures, the economic collapse, the environmental disasters, the educational breakdown, the data corruption in the Great Archive. He described the deaths, the suffering, the chaos. He held nothing back. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Minha spoke. "You wanted us gone. You called us inferior. You said we contributed nothing. Why should we return?" Trade Minister Kolvex, his gaseous form swirling with distress, spoke up. "Because you were right and we were wrong. Because our people are dying for our mistakes. Because we are asking, not demanding. Because we need you." "You need us now," Jiho said, his voice hard. "Where was that need when you voted to exile us? Where was it when you mocked our contributions? Where was it when you called our compassion weakness? It was always there, the old Velnari counselor said quietly. We simply refused to see it. We were too proud, too certain of our own superiority. We thought that because we had built great things long ago, we were still great. We forgot that greatness is not in creating something once. It is in maintaining it, nurturing it, caring for it every single day. You understood this? We did not. Dr. Hyjin, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. I spent 30 years helping your children learn alongside each other. I developed programs that let a young cradle understand a Thalmec's perspective, or let a Velnari appreciate organic art. Do you know why those programs are failing now? Because we do not understand them, one of the younger delegates admitted. No, Hyjin corrected. They are failing because they require something you cannot program into a computer. They require someone to care whether the children actually learn or just memorize. They require someone to notice when a student is struggling and needs extra help. They require someone to believe that every child, regardless of species, deserves a good education. You have the programs. You just do not have the heart. Counselor Varath's crystalline form seemed to dim. You are right. In every way you were right. We removed you because we did not value what you brought to our civilization. We confused technological advancement with wisdom. We confused age with superiority. We confused the ability to create with the ability to maintain. We were fools. Yes, Minha said simply. You were. The bluntness of her statement hung in the air. Then Varath did something that shocked everyone present, even the other council members. He stood and bowed to Minha, lowering his crystalline body in a gesture of submission that his species reserved for acknowledging a superior. We were fools, he repeated. And our foolishness has cost innocent lives. People who never voted against you, who never thought ill of humans, are suffering because of our pride. I am asking you, begging you to return, not for us. For them, Minha stood and walked to the window, looking out at the human colony below. Do you know what we did when we arrived here? She asked. We could have been angry. We could have spent our time planning revenge or nursing our bitterness. Instead, we built schools for our children. We built medical centers. We built farms and factories and homes. We built a civilization based on the principles you rejected: cooperation, compassion, and care. We proved that we did not need you, but you needed us. You always did. She turned back to face them. I want to help your people. Every human here wants to help. It is who we are. But I will not bring my people back to a civilization that will exile us again the moment we become inconvenient. I will not subject them to that pain again. What are your terms? Vireth asked. Terms? Minha laughed bitterly. You think this is a negotiation? Everything is a negotiation, the trade minister said. We came here to negotiate humanity's return. No, Ambassador, Minha said firmly. You came here to beg? Let us be clear about that. You are not in a position to negotiate. But I am not interested in your submission either. I am interested in change. Real change. She pulled up a display showing the chaos in the core systems. Look at this. Really look at it. This is what happens when a civilization values advancement over maintenance. When it values individual achievement over collective well-being. When it values pride over humility. Your civilization is not failing because your technology is old. It is failing because you forgot what civilization actually means. A young counselor named Subin spoke up. She had been part of a human-alien joint engineering project before the exile. Ambassador Minha, I've worked with your people for years. I learned more from them than from any other teachers I have had. They taught me that the most important question to ask when building something is not, can we make this? But should we make this? They taught me to think about who would be affected, who would benefit, who might be harmed. They taught me that technology without wisdom is just a more efficient way to make mistakes. She looked around at her fellow delegates. I opposed the exile. I voted against it, but I was one voice among thousands. I let the majority silence me rather than fighting harder. That was my failure. I am here not just to ask humans to return, but to promise that I will not be silent again. I will advocate for the changes that need to happen. Other delegates began to speak, sharing their own stories of working with humans, of the lessons learned and forgotten, of their shame at not fighting against the exile. Minha listened to all of them. Then she said, I need to speak with my people. This decision is too important to make alone. The delegation was given quarters on the station. They spent 3 days there, witnessing human society firsthand. They saw human children learning in schools that valued curiosity over memorization. They saw human engineers building systems with redundancy and safety built into every level. They saw human doctors treating patients with a level of care and attention that went far beyond mere technical competence. On the 3rd day, Minha called them back to the conference room. With her were Admiral Jiho, Dr. Hajin, and Engineer Dayun. Also present was someone unexpected, a young man named Taiyun, barely 20 years old. This is Taiyun, Minha introduced him. He was born during the Exodus. He has never seen the core systems. He represents the generation that knows nothing of the life we left behind. Taijun stood nervously before the council delegation. I have been listening to the debates among my people, he said. Some want to refuse your request. They say you do not deserve our help. FTR, what you did. Others want to return, to help those who are suffering. I am just one voice, but I think both sides are wrong. Oh. He took a breath and continued. You do not deserve our help. That is true. But the people suffering in your territories did not vote to exile us. The children dying from medical failures did not mock our compassion. The families starving because of agricultural collapse did not call us inferior. They do not deserve to suffer for your mistakes. He looked directly at Counselor Wraith. But we also should not return as we were before. We should not go back to being invisible, to doing the work you consider beneath you, while receiving no respect or voice. If we return, it must be as equals, not servants, not repair technicians. Equals. Minha smiled at Taijun, then turned to the delegation. He speaks for many of us. We will return. We will help rebuild what has been broken. But the terms are these. Humanity receives equal representation in the Galactic Council. Our rights and dignity are guaranteed in binding law. We maintain autonomous control over our own territories. And most importantly, we establish educational programs throughout the core systems, teaching all species the value of cooperation, maintenance, and care. We will not just fix your systems. We will teach you how to value the work of fixing them. Counselor Vareth did not hesitate. Agreed. All of it. We will draft the agreements immediately. There is one more thing, Admiral Jiho said. The humans who return will be volunteers. We will not force anyone to leave the homes they have built here. And those who go back will maintain the right to return to the Outer Rim at any time. You will never exile us again because we will never allow ourselves to be dependent on your approval. The delegation agreed to everything. As they prepared to leave, Counselor Varath approached Minha privately. I have one question, he said. You could have refused. You could have let us fail completely and then built something better from the ruins. Why did you agree to help? Minha looked at him with eyes that held both sadness and hope. Because that is not who we are. We do not watch civilizations burn when we have the power to save them. Even civilizations that wronged us. You called it weakness. Maybe it is. But it is our weakness, and we choose to keep it. The delegation returned to the core systems with news that help was coming. The galaxy waited, desperate and humbled. For humanity to return 2 years after the exile, Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of the first human ship to return to the core systems. Behind his vessel came a fleet of support ships, carrying engineers, doctors, teachers, and thousands of volunteers who had chosen to leave the peace of the Outer Rim to help rebuild a civilization that had rejected them. The journey back felt strange. Many of the crew had never expected to see the core systems again. Some were excited. Others were nervous. All of them understood the weight of what they were doing. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council, the communications officer reported. They are offering a formal welcome and requesting permission to hold a ceremony. Giho shook his head. Declined politely. We are not here for ceremonies. We are here to work. The fleet proceeded directly to the worst crisis zones. Engineer Daeun took his team to restore the defense network. Dr. Haijin led educators to failing school systems. Medical teams dispersed to hospitals across dozens of worlds. Each group carried the same message. They were here to help, but also to teach. Daeun arrived at the central hub of the defense network with a team of 30 engineers. They found the facility in chaos, with alien technicians frantically trying to prevent another sector collapse. The chief alien engineer, a Velnari named Koreth, met them at the entrance. Thank you for coming, Koreth said, his crystalline form showing stress fractures from exhaustion. We have been working around the clock, but everything we try fails. The system is too old, too complex. We do not understand it. Daeun walked through the facility, examining the ancient machinery that protected civilized space. He could see immediately what was wrong. The aliens had been treating the defense network like a modern system, trying to apply contemporary engineering principles to technology that operated on completely different rules. This technology is older than your civilization, Daeun said to Koreth. It was built by beings who understood things we have forgotten. My people did not know more than you. We simply approached it differently. We did not try to understand it all at once. We learned it piece by piece, respecting that it was beyond us, working with it instead of trying to control it. He began to work, his team spreading out 2 different sections of the network. But unlike before, when humans had worked alone in the shadows, Daeun now explained everything he did. See this relay? He said to Koreth. It should have failed 1,000 years ago, but it keeps working because of this secondary system here. The original builders put it in as a failsafe, but modern engineering would call it redundant. You removed it to improve efficiency. But in systems this old, redundancy is not inefficiency. It is survival. Koreth watched carefully, taking notes. Why did your people never tell us this before? We tried, Daeun said simply. You did not listen. You thought you knew better? Now you know you do not. That makes you ready to learn. Over weeks and months, the defense network began to stabilize. But more importantly, Koreth and his team learned to maintain it themselves. Daeun did not just fix the problems. He taught them how to fix future problems, how to think about ancient technology, how to respect what they did not fully understand in the medical centers. Dr. Borum emerged from hiding to join the relief efforts. She returned to Nexus Hub, where the crisis had begun. The alien doctors who had struggled with the human-designed equipment gathered around her, desperate for help. The machines keep refusing to operate, one doctor explained. They claim our treatment protocols are harmful, but we are using standard medical procedures. Dr. Borum examined their protocols. Standard for whom? She asked. This patient is thalmic. You are treating them with a protocol designed for cradle physiology. The machine is refusing because it knows this treatment would kill the patient. But both species have similar metabolic rates. The doctor protested. Similar is not identical, Borum explained patiently. The human medical systems were designed to account for subtle differences between species. We learned the biology of every species we treated. We did not rely on general protocols. We treated individuals. She began training sessions for the medical staff, teaching them not just how to operate the equipment, but how to think about medicine the way humans did. Every patient was unique. Every treatment required consideration of that specific individual's needs. Efficiency was less important than accuracy. Speed was less important than care. This takes so much more time, one doctor complained after a particularly long diagnosis session. Yes, Borum agreed. But the patient lives. Which would you prefer? Fast treatment or correct treatment? The doctor had no answer to that in the educational facilities. Dr. Hygiene worked to rebuild the cross-species learning programs. She found alien teachers who were overwhelmed, frustrated by systems they could not make work. Many had given up and returned to teaching only their own species. The programs are too complicated, one cradle teacher said. They require too much adjustment for each student. It is easier to just teach everyone the same way. It's easier for you, Hyjin replied. Harder for the students who learn differently? Tell me, do you remember learning from human teachers? Yes. They were very patient. We were patient because we understood something important. Every mind is different, not just between species, but within species. Some students need visual learning. Some need hands-on experience. Some need quiet contemplation. Some need group discussion. Teaching is not about delivering information efficiently. It is about helping each student understand in the way that works best for them. She worked with the teachers individually, showing them how to use the adaptive programs, how to recognize when a student was struggling, how to adjust their approach for different learners. It was slow work, but gradually the teachers began to understand. Young Taijun, who had spoken at the conference, worked with the agricultural teams. At 20 years old, he had grown up hearing stories about the core systems but never seeing them. Now he stood in the failing agricultural stations looking at depleted soil and dying crops. We can fix this, he told the alien farmers, but you need to understand why it broke in the first place. He explained the principles of sustainable farming, of crop rotation, of soil health, of working with nature instead of against it. The farmers listened, some eagerly, some skeptically. In the outer rim, we had nothing, Taejun said. We had to build our farms from scratch on worlds that had never known agriculture. We could not afford to make mistakes. We learned to treat the soil like a living thing, because it is. We learned that pushing for maximum yield today means nothing if the soil is dead tomorrow. You have the knowledge. You just have to choose to use it. Across the core systems, similar scenes played out. Humans worked alongside aliens, fixing what was broken, but more importantly, teaching why it had broken and how to prevent it from breaking again. But not everyone was happy with the changes in the Galactic Council. Heated debates raged about the new agreements. Humanity now had equal representation, with 5 human counselors taking their places among the other species. Some of the elder counselors resented this, feeling that their ancient civilizations should not be equal to such a young species. Counselor Vareth, however, had become humanity's strongest advocate. He spoke before the full council, his crystalline form radiating with conviction. Some of you say that humans do not deserve equal status, he said. You say they are too young, too primitive, too different from us. You are repeating the same mistakes that led to this crisis. We are not superior because we are old. We are not wise because we built great things long ago. We are only as good as what we do today, and today, humans are teaching us how to be better. The opposition was fierce, but gradually it weakened. The evidence was too clear. Every system that humans touched began to function again. More than that, the aliens working with humans were learning to maintain those systems themselves. The crisis was passing, and everyone knew why. Ambassador Minha stood before the council 6 months after the return and delivered her first official report. She did not sugarcoat the situation. We have stabilized the immediate crises, she said. The defense network is functional. Food production is recovering. Medical systems are operational. Education is improving. But none of this will last if you return to your old ways the moment we finish. She pulled up a display showing progress charts. These numbers show how much we have accomplished, but they also show something else. In every sector where humans and aliens work together, where aliens learn from humans instead of just relying on humans to fix things, the recovery is faster and more sustainable. In sectors where aliens resist learning, where they wait for humans to solve problems for them, progress is slower. She looked around the chamber. We did not come back to be your servants. We came back to be your partners. That means you must do your part. You must learn the lessons we are teaching. You must value maintenance as much as creation. You must care about the mundane work that keeps civilization running. If you cannot do this, then our presence here is pointless. Counselor Vareth stood. Ambassador Minha is correct. I propose we formalize this approach. One propose we establish the Concordat of Shared Responsibility, framework where every species commits to maintaining what we have built together, where humans teach, but others must learn, where we all contribute, not just to advancement, but to preservation. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. The Concordat of shared responsibility became galactic law. Years passed. The crisis faded into memory, but its lessons remained. A new generation grew up in a galaxy that was different from the one before. Young Cradle learned from human teachers. Young Velneri worked alongside human engineers. Young Thomic studied in programs designed by human educators. Admiral Jeho, now retired, stood on a rebuilt station and watched as a mixed team of human and alien engineers worked. Together to upgrade a section of the defense network, the alien engineers no longer waited for humans to tell them what to do. They worked as equals, each bringing their strengths to the task. Nearby, a medical center treated patients of every species with the same care and attention that human doctors had pioneered. In a school visible through a window, children of different species learned together, their differences celebrated rather than ignored. Ambassador Minha joined Jeho at the window. They were both older now, gray in their hair, lines on their faces from years of hard work. But they smiled as they watched the busy station. "Do you think it will last?" Jeho asked. "Or will they forget again?" "Some will forget," Minha said. "Some species, some individuals, will always believe they are superior, that they do not need to learn from others. But enough will remember. Enough have learned. The galaxy is different now. Not perfect, but better." Young Taejun, now a council member himself at just 25 years old, approached them. "Ambassador Minha, Admiral Jeho, the council is about to vote on the education expansion proposal. They wanted to know if you would like to observe." "What does the proposal do?" Jeho asked. "It makes cross-species education mandatory for all young citizens of the galaxy. Every child, regardless of species, will learn alongside at least 2 other species during their schooling. The council believes that if we teach cooperation from childhood, we will never face another crisis like the one that led to the exile." Minha and Jeho exchanged glances. "That is our proposal," Minha said. "The one we submitted 3 decades ago, before the exile." Kaiju nodded. "I know. It was rejected then. But the galaxy has learned since then. They understand now what you tried to teach them." They walked together to the council chamber. As they entered, Minha looked around at the counselors from 100 different species, all gathered in the chamber that represented their unity. It was not perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still species that felt superior to others. But there were also humans sitting as equals among them. There were aliens who had learned to value maintenance as much as creation, cooperation as much as advancement, humility as much as pride. The vote was called. The education expansion proposal passed with an overwhelming majority as the council adjourned. Counselor Vareth approached Minha. His crystalline form was older now, showing the wear of decades, but his voice was warm. "I've been thinking about what I said when we exiled you," he said. "I called you repair technicians and nursemaids as if those were shameful roles. I see now that there is no role more noble than caring for what others have built, healing those who are hurt, teaching those who wish to learn. You were never inferior. We were just too blind to see your worth." Minha placed a hand on his crystalline surface, a gesture of friendship that would have been unthinkable decades ago. "You learned, counselor. That is all anyone can do. We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." They stood together, looking out at a galaxy that had almost destroyed itself through pride and prejudice, but had chosen instead to grow through humility and cooperation. It was not the ending of humanity's story in the galaxy. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where all species worked together, learned from each other, and built a civilization that valued every contribution. No matter how small, Admiral Jeho had one final thought as he looked out at the stars. Humans had left, and the galaxy had realized the power of humanity. But that power was not the power to conquer or control. It was the power to help, to heal, to teach, to care. It was the power to make things work, not through domination, but through cooperation. And now the whole galaxy was learning to wield that power together. The story of humanity's exile had ended. The story of the new Concordat had begun. And in the end, Everyone was stronger for it.